Hey everyone, Meta here. I'm just going to be going ahead and jumping right into this 2021 cosmetic review. I actually recorded this a couple times already, but I really was turned off by how negative I was during all those recordings. So I think that the best way to go about this is just preface this by saying I think 2021 was the worst year in TF2 in terms of content. And I know that might be a bit of a bold statement, but the selections I have for the best and the worst are just really indicative of just how wide the gap of quality is in the TF2 community. Because I believe that the top ones here are fine for the most part. The one that stand out here is going to be the one that I'm going to talk about first. Instead of going from bottom to top here for the top cosmetics, we're just going to go from top to bottom. Because I truly feel like the decline in quality after the first couple cosmetics is so severe that it's noteworthy. And I just want to remind everyone that these videos are essentially me rating the peaks and valleys of cosmetic design. So there's a huge birth of quality between these, peaks and valleys. I just want to remind everyone that if your furry cosmetic shows up here on either side, you have to remember that there's probably like 20 or 30 more between these two that you could argue are worse or better or anything like that. All this is just for the point of discussion. And I think that we need to go ahead and get this discussion started. Starting with the obvious best items that could be released in 2021, the mandatory attire. Now, this necktie is pulling a lot of weight for this entire fucking year. Only 3 styles, but these 3 styles pack a lot of personality. We have character-specific references, we have role-specific references, we have, let's say, clean design, where there's not too much clipping with other things, it's not obtrusive, it generally just kind of looks good, and it basically does everything that a cosmetic should do without doing too much extra shit or by being so totally awful that it's, it makes your eyes want to bleed when you see it. So it's a clear best of the year. We're moving on to their second one here. I'm just going to go ahead and say that 2021 has a theme of gore. Like, a lot of strange stuff got added in 2021 that I don't think would have been added in any other year. I think it might have been like the pandemic that really just made the item quality just drop off a cliff, but I think some of the items got away with it in very innovative ways. For number 2, the hook, line, and thinker for the engineer, I think it does a great job in taking a really gory idea of just like peeling off someone's head and making it really seamless with the rest of like the engineer's kit. Like, sure, some people would like take issue with the ghost particle or whatever holding onto the top of engineer's scalp, but me personally, I think we've sort of established like the Flying Dutchman character in the maps, that this sort of ghostly ethereal thing, it's par for the course, especially around Halloween. Now, do I think this should have been holiday restricted? Yeah, absolutely. If the corpse carrier got holiday restricted but getting too gory and out of place, this should have gone there too. But that's a discussion I'm not too worried about having, especially because, well, we'll see later on. But for number 3 is going to be the Miami Rooster for Pyro. Obviously, pop culture references are nothing new to TF2. I like them, you like them, and for the most part, most of them are done tastefully and with good intent behind the character. This one I would argue is a weaker one. Like any other year, this is like middle of the pack, maybe even bottom tier cosmetic, but for this year, for 2021, it actually stands out for being a better one. It's just a shame that this one is also holiday restricted, even though it has none of the issues that some of the other cosmetics in this list do, such as number 4, the corpse carrier. Personally, I love this concept for this cosmetic. I mean, just in the loadouts alone, you have like War Soldier Scout being blown in half, you have Hunter Scout, you have like random like scrappy Fighter Scout. It's just the idea of just like a scout carrying around another blown in half scout. It's just so great. It innovates so well on the Mr. Mundy idea, but I kind of feel bad for this item because of the controversy that it got, where it got removed from the main cosmetic lineup and put on holiday restriction, even though, once again, things like the hook, line, and thinker got away scot-free. So I believe there are a little bit of double standards going on, but for the most part, another great cosmetic item. Unfortunately, I have to follow it up with something I consider to be a little bit mid and might make some people angry when they see what's below it, but the Brim of Fire for Pyro, I think it does everything that a cosmetic needs to do. It paints well, it doesn't clip too much, it brings something new to the character with his little cowboy hat look. It's a little bit garish, a little bit like hoity, but I think that for Pyro, for a character so nebulous as Pyro, it adds a lot of variety. And I've seen many loadouts being used with it. so I'm willing to say that it's versatile enough to work. It's just, it isn't personally to my taste, but I have to acknowledge that it is one of the better cosmetics. Unfortunately, for number 6, I am going to predict that quite a few people are going to be mad about it, but I will admit, the War Dog for Soldier is great. We're going to talk about like full head placements. The War Dog is one of the best out there. Like, better than most of the bird heads. Obviously, it lacks like any unique voice lines because unfortunately, Rick May has passed. Unfortunately, Valve isn't updating the game as they should. All these sort of things. But the War Dog, it manages to like not clip too much. It manages to make plenty of great loads around it. It just does a lot of great things. Like, even the way that it uses paint is really unique and special. And like, even the more garish colors out here for the War Dog look pretty solid. And like, obviously, I like that they include 2 styles, where you can have either the War Dog with just the eyes, or a War Dog with the hat. Either way, this is a great soldier cosmetic, and of all the things to be holiday restricted, this is the most unfortunate. Number 7, another item that I'm not too thrilled about being included in the top, but it's one that I accept. The Creepy Crawlers. It's an all-class cosmetic, has unique placement on each class. It's paintable, it's decent. Sometimes I think it can be a little bit too much, especially when it gets painted with like something like the pinks and the lime, but those paints have whole issues on their own that I cannot really get into right now. But of all the cosmetics to be added to it, these are unintrusive. These still allow plenty of like loadouts to be made. Even if I don't think they steal the show, they're well enough that they deserve to be safe from the bottom. And for number 8, this is another one of those cases where mid for any other year is just like the best of this year. It truly doesn't get much better. And number 8 is the Real Fly Cat. Yeah, just a bucket hat for Pyro. And this whole fishmonger set for Pyro is really odd. It pretty much falls into like the bin of like, if I were just to throw this set anywhere, it'd probably be in the bottom for any other year. But because this year is so weak, it is so bad that even something as mediocre as just a random bucket hat for Pyro that has no synergy with any other loadout skirts by just because it isn't as awful as the rest of its set around it, which, you know, is a massive indictment, but and really not my issue. Another item that I really don't have strong feelings about is the 1,000-yard steer for Soldier. Obviously, a lot of people will love this item. There's a lot of great Soldier items that were added this year, but a lot of their like memes about them has just soured on me. The 1,000-yard steer especially has soured on me hard because it's just, unlike the War Dog, which I can see having like a lot of like technical achievements being done with it, the 1,000-yard steer is just a meme through and through. And it's not a terrible meme, but it's a meme that leans too much into the whole obnoxious soldier main gimmick that it's just become so obnoxious and casual. It's hard for me to really appreciate an item when so many people that use it and advocate for it are just so forceful and obnoxious. I feel bad putting it this low, but at the same time, at least it's still in the top. Moving on to the last item here, this is pretty much our token Smithmas item because I didn't want to totally leave it off the top, but Smithmas 2021, it justifies its own video. There's definitely going to be a Smithmas 2021 critique, and it is going to be scathing. But of all the items added to it, the Ominous Offering is probably the best, and that's just because it's a cute, unobtrusive pet cosmetic. It just sits on the shoulder, doesn't bother anybody. He just does what he does, and he doesn't, you know, draw too much attention to himself. Fits into most loadouts, even though it's just a big Christmas present that doesn't have much synergy with anything else. It's inoffensive. I wouldn't mind seeing it outside the holiday, which is saying something because this holiday was particularly awful. And we'll begin to dip into that awfulness, but first, to begin our bottom 5, we have to talk about the Computron 5000, which is luckily a holiday restricted item added during Frame Fortress, and the only thing I can say in its favor is that it's better than the Enabler. Now, TF2 has a very particular art style when it comes to robots. Robots, mechanical creatures, things like that. Like, there are things in this game that don't fit TF2's art style at all when it comes to like doing like cyber augmentations and things like that. And even though the Computron attempts to get closer to it than say like the Enabler or the Deus Ex items, it still fails to hit the mark. It's too blocky, it's too squared off. Even though the colors do fit the game, it just, you struggle to find any synergy with anything else, and it generally is just so undesirable. Not even like talking about its whole holiday restriction. So yeah. Number 4. Now, I have a lot to say about this like scout loadout that they even included in the game here. I believe it's on the workshop. It's called the Hot Takeout, and I'd probably say from that set the what is it? The chicken like hat, the chicken hat and the hairdo. It's probably the best item in that set. But the worst item is definitely going to be the fast food, which is the back cosmetic. The fast food is just so. I mean, what do I say? The paper bag on it makes everything awkward. Painting the fry box doesn't really help it become more appealing. Like, the base team colors are fine enough for it, but making this hot pink or lime will not improve this item whatsoever. And it's just so blocky and so unnatural. Like, sure, the item colors match with the character model enough, but it's just, of all the places to compete with an item, you have the cooler, you have the boombox, you have so many other attractive options for Scout. So many options that look better than this. It is the weakest link. It is the weakest link on a very weak year. And we're going to speak about weak years and awful concepts. Who decided that giving Spy a Christmas tree balaclava was a good idea? The festive cover-up for Spy is one of the most putrid items ever added to this game. It is truly meritless. And I hate that this thing has jiggle bones, because there are some people out there who were just like obsessed with that little function, that little mechanic in the game, and this item is just, it is so ugly, it is so unappealing, it is so garish, so overly saturated, and I know so many people who love it for all those reasons. And if you're one of those people, all power to you, but you cannot tell me that this is not one of the single worst items ever added to this game. But at least it's in good company, because the other Smith's item in our bottom 5 is going to be the Mary Cone. The Mary Cone is essentially a garden gnome strapped to someone's head. And sure, once again, the colors match with TF2's art style. Sure, it doesn't look like a train wreck on someone's head, but it isn't much better. Just because it isn't like cancer, some autoimmune disease, anything like that, that doesn't mean that it isn't awful. Because strapping a Santa Claus gnome onto someone's head and calling that a hat, this isn't even like a party hat situation where you can justify its shape. No, this is just a big, awkward polygon strapped to someone's head, and it lacks any versatility. It's so unappealing, and it's an assassin grade, so it's expensive as fuck for no good reason. So yeah, awful. And if we're gonna finish off this list, we might as well talk about the most awful of the bunch, which is the Sideliner. I really don't like gimmick loadouts. Gimmick loadouts are really boring because, there's only one concept you can really go with this. The Sideliner is the epitome of a gimmick, because you are literally just engineer becomes his sentry, and that is one of my least favorite and the least interesting of all the gimmick loadouts you can put together. And I've put together a couple of like loadouts where the engineer becomes mechanically enhanced, but there's nothing more boring than seeing an engineer become one with his sentry as a head. It really just boils down to unoriginality. We've already had items that try to make the engineer his sentry. We've already had items that add sentries to the engineer. We've already done the sentry gimmick so much, and this one is the worst implementation of them all. I don't care if it has facial flexes, I don't care if it has paint regions, I don't care what it has going for it. This is the most boring, most gross, industrial looking piece of crap ever strapped to an engineer in my life. And that's why it's going to be the very bottom of the bottom of the very bottom of the bottom years. So yeah, that's 2021. Not a great spread, and most of these are genuinely awful. But at least there's a few bright spots, and hopefully this recording is a little bit more tolerable than what the original would have been. But yeah, 2020 is coming up, and I hope that the actual pandemic was going to be a little bit more kind than the second year of it. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.